Coming up next on At Issue, we'll be talking about social media and the role that it plays in law enforcement. Recently, several leads on local cases were conveyed through the use of social media. Our guests are Lieutenant Brad Oyer of the Charleston Police Department and Deputy Chief Jason Taylor of the Mattoon Police Department. We'll talk about the pros and cons of social media when it comes to solving crimes. So should Facebook be the new way to book criminals? We'll talk about that next on At Issue. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host, Lori Casey, for At Issue, and our topic, of course, is social media and law enforcement. Gentlemen, let's start with, when did your respective departments start a Facebook page? Brad, I'll start with you.
We started about a year ago. That's when we really started using it. We had it before that. We didn't have very many people who had friended us. We put some information out about the department, but it really didn't take off until we decided to get more active and put more arrest information on there as far as what our officers are doing in the community as far as arrest situations and press releases.
Mm-hmm. And Jason, how about the Mattoon Police Department? When did you guys start?
We didn't start until about 2 months ago.
Okay.
And we started after hearing about success that Charleston PD and Brad Oyer had on their Facebook page.
So did you guys as a department sit down and say, should we do this? What were were there some things that, you thought, well, these could be some possible pitfalls of starting this, but then there's some upsides to it as well?
Sure, there was a lot of discussion between Chief Baker and Deputy Chief Chambers and myself in exactly what we want out of it and how we want to get there and what the overall goal is as far as letting the community know what's going on within their community as far as what their police department is doing. So there was a lot of discussion and a lot of things we learned as we went also.
We'll talk about some of those things that you sort of learned as you got to learn from Charleston.
You bet, you bet, yeah, they were the guinea pig.
So what were some lessons that you learned along the way?
Comments were the first one, and it was something that we really hadn't discussed a whole lot of in the what ifs when we decided to put some of this, we decided to put our press releases on there. Mm-hmm. The same thing that we would send to the television stations and the newspaper, we decided to go ahead and put that press release on Facebook. And once the comments started coming in, some of which were very negative, some of which were very hurtful. And we had to make some decisions on the fly about getting rid of those. And that's been the final decision, is that we found that comments oftentimes go towards the negative, and that's really not the flavor that we want for our Facebook page. Mm-hmm. So we delete the comments as they come in.
Jason, who handles the Facebook news feed at your office?
The chief and I decide the content and what goes on the page, mm-hmm. and then Detective Sergeant Sam Gaines adds the content to the page itself. But expanding on what you said about comments, we found the same thing on our page, that you have to police it every day, a couple times a day, to watch for slurs and inappropriate content posted by the public. For instance, if people behave differently online, if I were to say some things to Brad, you'd probably get mad and punch me in the nose since we're here in person. But for some reason, people have a sense of security at a computer and they say things they normally wouldn't say mm-hmm. in person, and it causes bickering and dissension.
But do you have people say, well, the police are policing and trumping on my freedom of speech by taking off my comments? How do you handle that?
I basically just ignore it. They know the comment's inappropriate to begin with. And the JG, Journal-Gazette, has a lot more experience with that than we do. They've had an online forum much longer.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some recent cases. I think the one that probably got the most attention was the murder at Toaster's Bar. Walk us through how social media, how that whole thing started.
Obviously, a homicide occurred on a Monday night, and generally in a homicide, within the first 24 hours are crucial periods, and you've got a general direction on which way you want to go with the investigation. In this case, we didn't. We didn't have any leads at all. Unfortunately, just a corpse. We made a decision that we would release a picture of a person of interest that was at an adjoining bar the night of the murder. That person acted a bit outside the norms of human behavior, if you will. So we released that picture to the Journal-Gazette, Times-Courier newspaper, and they placed it on their Facebook page. And within the first hour, it had 11,000 views, which really shocked me because I'm not into Facebook and online social media. Within a day, it had been viewed like 60,000 times. As a result of that picture being placed on Facebook at the Journal-Gazette, we received about 50 tips overnight, and ended up one of those tips put us on the right track.
Okay. How do you handle, I mean, now you've got, you know, we've always had people could call to the police department with tips, they got Crime Stoppers. Now you've got a huge volume. How does that add to your workload, and how do you filter through all these tips?
It's tough because you go from nothing to being suffocated with tips, and you have to allocate your manpower accordingly. So what we did, we sat down and we looked through all 50 tips. 10 or 12 of them revolved around one person. We'll call him Person A, and we spent considerable time on Person A. At least 4 detectives did before ruling him out. But we were looking for a mold, a certain type of person that would commit that type of crime, and we thought that it would fit one of 2 molds. Once some other developments took place in that investigation, we pulled Tommy Odell's name out of the tip file because he fit into the mold that we were seeking that person to fit into. And the investigation really gained steam at that point.
I mean, I have friends who follow different, I saw it on my, and that's the beauty of social media. One person sees it, they repost it, and it just goes out. Did you repost it on your site, or how did you guys have a role in it? I believe we did.
Also, once I found out through somebody else's that it was out there, I went ahead and went to their page and put it on Charleston Police Department's also. If we can help share information like that, it just reaches that many more people.
Do you have any thoughts on how much faster that case got solved because of posting it? I mean, do you have any opinions on that?
I think at least several days at minimum. And that may have been the key to opening that case. I'll never know otherwise. But that was a crucial step when somebody said, that's Tommy Odell in that picture, that person of interest.
Can you, for people who might have not followed, can you kind of tell us how the case sort of ended?
We obtained an arrest warrant for Tommy Odell for the robbery and murder of Benjamin Newton. And Tommy Odell had fled the state, went on a crime spree, stole a few more cars, and he broke into a pharmacy in Bryant, Arkansas. And a Bryant police officer responded to the pharmacy alarm, and he and Tommy had a shootout, and Tommy was killed and the officer was wounded.
Okay. So Brad, you had said you use the Facebook page a lot of times for identifying people that might be on some grainy surveillance footage.
Sure.
Can you talk about a few examples?
We take the store surveillance. Luckily, we haven't had a homicide that we've had to put surveillance pictures up. But for lesser crimes, even retail thefts such as that, where you've got some video footage or still pictures from the store's cameras, and we put that on and have had enormous success with them. Sometimes I think 10 minutes is the shortest time so far from the time I posted it to the time the detective's phone's ringing, and by and large, the detective gets, if he gets several names, it's by and large it's the same name. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they run right out and arrest somebody. It just gives them a direction in which to start investigating and somebody to go talk to.
Something to work with.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Are your departments surprised at how effective it's been using Facebook?
I'm shocked because I'm not literate in technology, and I don't Facebook, and I'm the last to adopt technology. But when you, like Brad said, when you get these responses in 10 minutes as far as who a suspect is at a theft at Walmart, that we have no idea who he is, it's amazing, and it saves countless hours of manpower trying to run it down. And
also, to add something to that too, there's a lot of people in the community who really enjoy being part of the process, I believe. That they like being able to help the police department make their community safer, and help the police in general. So I think it also helps build a relationship between the police department and the community as well.
We can all be crime investigators from our desktop.
Somewhat, yes, yes.
Yeah. So are there legal issues, or how do you have the right when it's your Facebook page to take off and edit whatever you want? I mean, how do you handle that?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
We police our site, and we put our content that we want to communicate to the public on that site. And if somebody posts something on there that is offensive, vulgar, or unproductive, we'll take it off.
You spoke before we started taping about an incident on a school bus that had actually started with 2 students, led to Facebook. Can you kind of explain that?
A couple girls were bickering back and forth on Facebook. That led to an argument on the school bus, which led to their families becoming involved and actually getting on the school bus, and it was just silliness. But it started at Facebook. Yeah. Again, going back to what I said earlier, people will say things on a computer that they normally wouldn't say face to face, and it gets them in trouble.
So what are some other ways that you're using Facebook other than to catch criminals?
One of the things that we used it for, and really the kind of the concept when it was set up, was to have an audience by the followers on Facebook to where we could get information to, such as road closures, or in certain areas we're having car burglars, make sure and lock up your cars, that type of things. And we still use it to give crime tips and things like that. But we've learned along the way other things that it's used for and helpful for. But that was our initial, that was the initial goal.
Okay. And Jason, what other ways are you guys in Mattoon using it?
We're going to follow Brad and Charleston. We want to communicate with the public and be responsive to the taxpayer, and that seems to be a good means of doing it on Facebook. I assume we'll be starting to post some safety tips around Halloween and things for hot weather, things of that nature, hot weather advisories and weather watches and whatnot. But we're a community police department. We want to communicate with the citizens and taxpayers, and that seems to be a good way to do it.
Brad had mentioned earlier it's building, in your opinion, sort of a better rapport with the police department. Are you feeling the same thing?
I think so, because people are starting to message us on Facebook, and normally they wouldn't come in and talk to us, but they'll send us a message on the computer, and we can chat back and forth that way, and it's been a nice addition to our capabilities.
Are other police departments in our region doing the same thing that you know of?
Not to the extent that we have.
I don't think so. I think Charleston's pretty well leading the way on this issue. I look for numerous other departments to start going this route because it's been productive for us. There's a few headaches that come with it, but overall, my initial impression is it's a positive tool we can use to reach the public.
Where do you see it going? I mean, it started, small. It's like, it started off, Facebook started with college students saying, hey, here's where the next party is, and now we're using it to help solve crimes. Yeah.
Well, social media, I've talked about this before. The 5-6 years ago, MySpace was huge, and it's kind of gone away. Facebook's come up. 2-3 years from now, it may be something completely different. And what I guess we need to do is always look for what the next avenue is going to be to communicate with people, because it may, in a couple of years, it may not be Facebook anymore. We may be working another different social media as the technology makes its normal shifts.
It sounds like when you started the Facebook page, you started it more as here's a way to communicate some information. Did you think that it would be such a, I don't want to say a great involved so heavily in crime solving? Or was that your intention, was to let's put some pictures out there and see what we can get as far as tips? Yeah,
it wasn't our initial intention. Our initial intention was to get a good base of followers to where we could send a message to about some tips. And then once we started using it and put some surveillance pictures on there, we really had so much luck with that. And not luck, but success with that, that we started leaning more and more that way. The detectives really like using that.
So do you think it curtails crime at all, knowing that if I, attempt to rob this convenience store, my picture may end up on social media?
Not yet. I could see that changing in the future, but to date, I've seen people talking about crimes that have been committed on Facebook, and they may as well stand on Broadway Avenue across from the police station and yell it towards the police station what they've done, because they're advertising it to the world. There's no locks on that information. So I think that'll change eventually, but right now it's wide open.
So what other ways have you used it? You used it to convey information, to solve crimes. Any other ways that you'd like to see it going? I mean, you can post videos, you post all sorts of stuff on there.
Certainly, and I guess the deputy chief mentioned it also. People communicate with the police department, and that's the way that they normally feel comfortable communicating. They're not going to come in, and they don't feel comfortable picking up the phone, but they have no problem whatsoever sending us a message and communicating that way. And we've gotten a lot of good information that way. The Crime Stoppers is out there. But
and that's been around for years.
Yeah, it has. But for some reason, they may just feel more comfortable talking to us through Facebook, because that's how they talk to most of their friends that way. So yeah, we've had a lot of success that way also in just communicating with the community.
Do you have any sense of who is using it, or what demographic or age group? I mean, you can kind of tell by people's Facebook picture, unlike, maybe the Journal-Gazette's, forum, it just has a username. You can't really tell. Is it young? Do you think it's younger people using it more than the older generation?
There's actually a tab that you can click on that when you're set up like we are, and it tells you what the whole demographics are. So yeah, we know that from 18 to 35 females are hands down the highest users on there, and females in every age category is higher than males.
Okay.
So yeah, if you're wanting to communicate to the 18 to 35-year-old female group, that seems to be the best way to do it.
And are you finding the same thing on your Facebook
I do.
page?
It seems like it's teenagers through people in their late 40s seem to be the primary users from what I've seen, and I think it's going to be even more of a means of communication in the future, especially as this generation graduates from college and comes into business. I think you'll see businesses change due to change in communication technology.
Yeah. I mean, are there certain types or personalities or populations of people that are more likely to report crimes? Like you said, wanting to be, at-home Crime Stoppers. Are there certain people that kind of get into that, or?
I don't know if, I think that crosses all lines, really. I think that there's people who are really interested in their community, and they don't want to see the retailers being taken advantage of. They don't want to see the stores that they shop at be victims of shoplifting, and they by all means don't want to see homicides in their community, and they're going to do what they can to help the police make a better community for them and their family.
Others are spiteful. One crook just wants to rat on another because he doesn't like him.
Yeah, that's true.
Fine
and
with
it's a way to get your argument out there without actually having that verbal face-to-face confrontation. Let's kind of just switch topics as we're coming into spring and summer. What sort of things should we as the public be thinking of in terms of crime prevention? As I know, especially here on campus, spring, summer, you see more parties and things like that. Are there things that we can do as citizens to keep our community safe, our neighborhood safe, our property safe as we head into this change of season?
If you see something, say something. If you've got a gut feeling that something isn't right, feel free to call the police. We're open 24/7, and we're there to serve you. As far as practical tips, don't leave valuables in plain sight in your car. Don't leave your windows down and your car unlocked. That's inviting a criminal to take your belongings. With school getting out, there's generally a rise in vandalism in the neighborhoods, and there's generally a rise in burglaries to motor vehicles.
Okay.
So don't leave stuff in your car, and if you see something, report it.
Brad, for people who live here in Charleston?
We experience the same problems. The best advice I would tell people is the same thing. Don't leave valuables in plain sight, or better yet, don't leave valuables in your vehicle.
Right.
Keep them locked. And vehicle burglaries are a huge problem in most communities, I think. Charleston as well as Mattoon. And for the student population, when you go home, think about the things you left behind. I really encourage students to take their laptops and stacks of DVDs and that type of thing. Just, it may take you an extra 10 or 15 minutes to fill that back seat, but a lot of burglars know that the certain areas are left unattended, and we spend a lot of time patrolling those areas, looking for people who are taking advantage of that. But if you live in the student housing, please take the valuables with you when you go home.
Okay. I had another thought pop into my head. Back, I think it was more this winter, we seem to be dealing with a lot of crimes related to race and, you know, certain populations in a black hoodie. Are we still seeing that sort of tension? I don't know if I want to call it racial tension, but I know on the Charleston Facebook page there was a lot of, I think when we had a disturbance at one of the local bars between certain populations. Is that kind of dying down a little bit? It seemed to be, there was on the Facebook page a lot of racial slurs and things like that related to, maybe started with that incident. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, there was an incident of a shooting that happened. And when I say shooting, somebody shot holes in somebody else's vehicle, and it was at one of the local bars in the early morning hours, and we had a arrest made of an unrelated incident at the same time. Okay. And there were some inappropriate comments placed on there, and we absolutely don't condone inappropriate comments, and that's one of the reasons we do take them off, is we don't want to be associated. We don't want the Charleston Police Department to be associated with those inappropriate comments. And I think that, you know, like the deputy chief said in other incidents, you end up having people say things, whether they're serious or just trying to be funny, they can be very offensive. And they may not say it in a public forum, but for some reason at home on their computer, on their phone, they feel very at ease doing so. So we take every effort to clean those up, and we're absolutely not gonna condone insulting speech on our Facebook page about anybody. Okay, I guess regardless of race or any other factor.
The reason I brought that up is that sort of incident brought about a town hall meeting here on campus about racial tensions and racial profiling, that sort of stuff. Has it? That's what I was curious if it's kind of sort of died down a little bit.
There was some good interaction and dialogue between different groups, and I think dialogue is a good thing. Everybody's welcome here in Charleston, and this is a good community, and the opportunity to get together and talk about some of these issues is never a bad thing either.
So let me ask, Jason, we talked about this. If you look at a string of, you know, comments on a Facebook news feed, do you think that shows what our climate of our community is like? If there's a lot of racial, you know, comments, does that sort of say we're kind of in sort of a?
No, I don't think so at all.
You don't think it's not an accurate picture of the climate of our communities?
I think racism is long dead, and you've got a few holdouts that mouth off, but I think it's a very small percentage of the overall community. I think our cities are wide open for people of any race, color, or creed.
I suppose it could be also a way for, if you look at comments and people seem to be, you know, commenting or complaining about a similar situation or something, does that sort of lead you guys as the police to say, we may need to take a look into this? People seem to, there's a common theme here.
It is a very good way to get the temperature of the community and find out what's important to them and what's not. Usually when they've got a complaints like that they want to air, they do it through the messaging section. That's where we usually end up getting that. It's not on the comments because, well, we delete it fast enough. They're usually, it doesn't get a chance to get too much dialogue involved. And both of our departments have done this long enough now. We kind of, when we post something, we kind of understand what we're going to have to really watch carefully also.
Sort of prepare yourself for what might erupt from that.
Sometimes we get surprised, I'm sure we do. But most of the time when we post something, we know whether this is going to be something that may stir up a bunch of comments or not. Emotion. Yeah.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming on and talking about the topic today. It's good to see that something like this is effective in solving crimes, and hopefully it still can never do the work of replace the job of good police work, right?
Correct.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And if you have comments about At Issue or ideas, topics that we should have on our program, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is weiu@weiu.net. For At Issue, I'm Lori Casey. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.